very seriously. It is an attack on a company, it's an attack on its employees, and frankly, it's an attack on the freedoms that we enjoy in this country. We're reviewing a range of options for how we will respond to this attack.
We'll be vigilant. If we see something that we think is serious and credible, then we'll alert the public. But for now, my recommendation would be that people go to the movies.
Well, the president's saying go to the movies. You will not be able to go to one movie, The Interview, after Sony said they are not releasing this movie on Christmas Day under duress after these threats. Critics are saying the president should have stood behind Sony and said, if you wanted to show the film, we've got your back, essentially. You've heard in Howie's piece a number of actors weighing in. A tweet from Zach Braff, canceling The Interview seems like a pretty horrible precedent to set. This, of course, on the background and the backdrop of cyber attacks increasing every day. Let's bring in our panel. Judge Andrew Napolitano, Fox News senior judicial analyst, Mara Liasson, national political correspondent of National Public Radio, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Okay, Judge, what are your thoughts?
Sony is a private company, and they can do what they want with their own product, but their decision was utterly gutless, utterly reprehensible, utterly cowardly. They should have distributed the product and let the theaters decide, and local police, like in New York City, would have provided the security. Big picture, the federal government has a profound obligation to protect the nation from physical invasion as well as cyber invasion. It has a profound obligation to protect our freedom of speech. That this movie was crushed because it's a satire about a monster, a person we have every right to criticize and mock, is totally alien to the American tradition.
But if you're that company, Sony, and you're hearing from theaters saying, we're worried, these threats are out there.
Some of the fears are real. Look at what happened in Aurora, Colorado. So if I'm Sony, I put this thing on YouTube. And there's nobody that can stop it. And everybody who wants to watch it can watch it. And if I'm the President of the United States, I say, put it in a theater in D.C., because I'm bringing my wife and daughters, and we're going to go watch it.
Or air it at the White House theater.
I think that I find it hard to believe that there wasn't another way for Sony to handle this. I think that the security is up to the theaters. I totally understand their point of view. If they feel like it would depress traffic to the mall that they're in, or they're worried about it, okay, they don't have to show it. But for Sony to actually yank it means that the hackers won. That's exactly what they wanted. I think it's really bad. And why couldn't they have distributed DVD copies for free, or as the judge said, put it on YouTube? I think there were other ways to do this that would have upheld the principle but still understood the security risk.
It's interesting. Actors have weighed in. Politicians have weighed in. Mitt Romney said, put out the DVDs for free. Newt Gingrich said, stand up. The hackers are winning.
I'm not sure I would have shown it at the White House. Security at the White House has been a little spotty lately.
But this is a Japanese company, don't forget. This is a Japanese company.
Look, I think this is not sort of rocket science. Sony made exactly the wrong decision. It knew once the threat was made and the theaters were not going to show it because they've got lawyers who say they would be sued if anything happened, what Sony had was a very easy option. It knew it was going to lose the money put into it. I think it was $40 million. It has lost a lot more than that in a lot of other movies. So you write it off, you're never going to get it. You can release it 6 months in a year, it's not going to happen. So you write it off, and what you do is what the judge said. You put it out on the internet for free. So it's a gesture, but also it doubly screws over Pyongyang. The idea of doing all this, the whole cyber attack, was that so the world wouldn't see the movie. Well, now the world would see it in far larger numbers than it ever would if it were a paying proposition at the theaters. So I think it would have been condign punishment for the North Korean regime. It would have shown, it would have been a gesture, and it would have shown that we can get you back. I mean, look, you could also do it by having some kind of guarantee from the federal government. Everybody will be safe. But if you're going to go to the movies with your family on Christmas, are you going to really want to go to a movie that you wouldn't have gone to anyway? Not exactly. I mean, a comedy about North Korea is not exactly a great draw. And you would do it with a threat, you wouldn't go.
Nick writes in, Sony is a Japanese company. How did this hacking become our problem? Well, because it was going to be released in the U.S., and now a company has decided against it. Also, the hacking, as we talked about, Judge, these cyber attacks are increasing by the day. You've been very critical of the NSA, but there is a side of the NSA that is a cyber defense.
Yes.
That is said to be crucial. I did a piece at the NSA with outgoing NSA director, former NSA director, Keith Alexander, and he talked about some of the issues. Take a listen to this.
What we can take is real-time capabilities and defend our networks from threats coming at them. At the same time, we see those threats going towards cleared defense contractors and other critical parts of our industry. But we have no mechanism for sharing information back and forth in real time. So that means if a missile, take the physical analogy, a missile coming into a military installation, we can shoot it down. But if it's going into civilian population, we have nothing that we can do other than let the missile hit and then talk to them about what they can do to clean it up.
So he's saying their hands are tied. They can protect government.
They should be able to protect us without spying on us. Now, I don't know the technology of how that would work, but a part of their mission is absolutely necessary. In terms of this being a Japanese company, it's possible. The FBI knows more about this than they're letting on, and this is something between North Korean blackmailers and Sony executives in Japan. We don't know.
Mara, what about the role that we are increasingly facing this cyber terrorist threat?
Well, it's going to get worse, and there has to be a way to harden networks in these companies, number one, and I'm not sure how you do that. But there has to be
he's saying, Alexander was saying back then, and they still say now, the current NSA director, that there isn't legislation that enables them to provide all they can to civilian companies. They can do a lot for government agencies and government computers.
You're saying that the government's anti-cyber attack capabilities is so far advanced from anything in the private sector that, for instance, Sony could go out and buy from some security company.
They can see it coming, and because there's not legislation, the one that failed on Capitol Hill, the Mike Rogers, the Lieberman, all that.
There has to be a way to, if the government has the ability to defend, there has to be a way to get that into the private sector.
But look, we have these cycles where when we have a period of quiet, a period of safety, all of a sudden we get all upset about the methods that we had used in the past, as in the interrogation report, or about NSA intrusion into our lives. This is the government spying on us. We have to understand, and in the grown-up world, there's a trade-off between security and liberty. You can pretend, as Obama does, that there is no trade-off. There always is. It has been since the beginning of time. We are now seeing the results of these kinds of attacks. It starts with a movie studio, which in the scheme of things is trivial, but it could hit our power stations, hit our nuclear facilities. It could hit our banking system where all the records are wiped out. This would be a catastrophe for the country on a Pearl Harbor scale. And I think we simply have to grow up as a nation and say, if it takes the NSA intruding, of course, with the consent of the companies involved, we're going to have to accept that. Otherwise, we're going to live under the sword of Damocles.
Now, Judge, I know you could expound for a long time.
But
short answer.
I just wanted to set him off.
Short response.
No time left.
The relationship between liberty and security has to be a bias, not a balance. A bias in favor of freedom. You can sacrifice your liberty, but you can't sacrifice mine.
And what happens if the banking system is wiped out and the country is absolutely immobilized?
I don't know why we would have to sacrifice liberty in order to keep the banks safe.
Because they're going to have to open up their internal networks and their secrets and have the government intrude, and you and I are going to have to trust the government not to overstep.
Why is the government the only one?
They have the resources, they have the facilities, they have the experience, and they're the ones who can do it.
Nobody trusts the government to restrain itself because it can't.
It's protected you ever since the American Revolution.
So much for that commercial break. Next up.